The auditorium erupted in applause as Sarah crossed the stage, her cap slightly askew, her diploma clutched in trembling hands. Camera flashes turned the moment into something that should have felt like triumph. Her family cheered from the third row. Colleagues from her program stood and whistled. But in the back corner, near the exit, her husband stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, holding something folded in his jacket pocket. Sarah saw him. Their eyes met for half a second before he looked away. That's when she knew. This wasn't just another argument waiting to happen. This wasn't tension they could smooth over with silence or wine or separate bedrooms. This was the end, and he'd chosen today, of all days, to deliver it. The celebration continued around her, but Sarah's world had already started to collapse. Because what no one in that room understood yet, not even her husband, was that this graduation wasn't just symbolic. It was the final piece of something much bigger, something that would change everything. And he had no idea what he was about to walk away from. Why would a man choose his wife's proudest moment to end their marriage? What resentment had been building so quietly that it reached its breaking point on graduation day? And what was Sarah carrying, hidden beneath that black gown and forced smile, that would make his decision the most expensive mistake of his life? These are the questions we're going to answer. But first, before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because this story, this quiet unraveling of a marriage, isn't just about betrayal. It's about timing. It's about assumptions. And it's about the devastating cost of underestimating someone you claim to love. Sarah wasn't always the woman standing on that stage. 5 years earlier, she'd been a mid-level marketing coordinator at a consumer goods company, talented but overlooked, the kind of person managers praised in private but never promoted. She had ideas, sharp ones, but every time she pitched them in meetings, someone else, usually a man, would reframe the same concept 10 minutes later and get the credit. She didn't complain. She kept her head down, took notes, stayed late, and waited for her moment. That's where she met David. He was confident, charming, worked in finance at a competing firm. He had the kind of swagger that filled rooms, the kind of laugh that made people want to be near him. He noticed her at an industry mixer, told her she had something different about her, something quiet but magnetic. They dated for 8 months before he proposed. The wedding was small, elegant, exactly what Sarah wanted. For the first 2 years, things were good. David supported her, or at least he said he did. But support, Sarah would later realize, isn't the same as belief. When Sarah told him she wanted to go back to school for her MBA, David smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, "If it makes you happy." But his tone suggested he thought it was a hobby, something to keep her busy while he climbed his own ladder. He never asked about her classes, never read her case studies. When she stayed up late working on group projects, he'd walk past her desk and say things like, "Still at it, huh?" with a kind of bemused pity. Sarah told herself he was just stressed. His job was demanding. His boss was difficult. She made excuses for the distance growing between them. The way he stopped asking about her day, the way her achievements seemed to irritate him instead of inspire pride. Then the parameters started shifting. David got passed over for a promotion he'd been promised. He grew bitter, drank more, spent weekends on the couch scrolling his phone in silence. Meanwhile, Sarah was thriving. Her professors noticed her. Classmates sought her input. She won a national case competition. But every time she shared good news, David's face would tighten. He'd nod, say that's great, and change the subject. The marriage became a performance. They still went to dinners with friends, still posted photos that looked happy. But at home, they were strangers. And David, quietly, had begun to resent the woman he married. It started with small things. A sigh when Sarah mentioned an upcoming presentation. A sarcastic comment when she got home late from a study group. "Must be nice," he'd say, "having all this free time to play student while I'm actually working." Sarah would bite her tongue, tell herself he didn't mean it, that he was just tired. But the comments became sharper, more frequent. He started referring to her MBA as your little project. When she was invited to present at a conference, he didn't congratulate her. He asked if it paid anything. When she said no, he shook his head and muttered, "Figures." One night, 6 months before graduation, Sarah sat at the kitchen table working on her thesis. David walked in, poured himself a drink, and stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. You really think this is going somewhere? He asked. Sarah froze. What do you mean? I mean, you're almost 40. You're spending all this time and money on a degree that, let's be honest, probably won't change anything. You'll graduate, get a certificate, maybe a slight bump in pay if you're lucky. But you're not going to be a CEO, Sarah. That's not realistic. She didn't respond. She couldn't, because part of her wondered if he was right. But what David didn't know, what Sarah hadn't told him because she knew he wouldn't understand, was that her thesis wasn't just academic. It had caught the attention of someone important. A venture capitalist named Elena Cross, one of the few women in the industry who'd built an empire without apology. Elena had reached out after seeing Sarah's work published in a trade journal. They'd been meeting quietly for months, discussing ideas, exploring partnerships. Sarah was careful. She didn't want to get her hopes up. She didn't want to tell David until it was real, until there was something concrete to show him, something he couldn't dismiss. So she kept working, kept quiet, and watched her marriage dissolve in slow motion. By the time graduation approached, they were barely speaking. David had moved into the guest room. They ate separately, lived separately. Sarah assumed divorce was inevitable. She just didn't expect him to make it public. Graduation day was warm, too warm for the heavy gown. Sarah's parents flew in from Ohio. Her younger brother brought his wife and their toddler. They took photos outside the auditorium before the ceremony, everyone smiling, everyone pretending not to notice that David stood off to the side, checking his phone. When Sarah's name was called, she walked across that stage with her heart pounding, not from pride, but from exhaustion. She'd made it. Despite everything. Despite him. The applause felt distant, like it was meant for someone else. She shook hands with the dean, accepted her diploma, and returned to her seat. The ceremony ended an hour later. Families flooded the lobby, hugging, crying, taking more pictures. Sarah's mom wrapped her in a long embrace. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." Her dad kissed her cheek. Her brother lifted his daughter onto his shoulders and said, "Auntie Sarah's a genius, kiddo." And then David appeared. He didn't hug her, didn't smile. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, folded in half. "I need you to sign these," he said. Sarah stared at him. "What?" "Divorce papers. I had my lawyer draw them up last week. I think it's time we stop pretending." The lobby noise seemed to disappear. Sarah's mother gasped. Her brother stepped forward, furious, but Sarah raised a hand to stop him. She looked at David, really looked at him, and saw nothing. No regret. No hesitation. Just cold certainty. "You're doing this now?" she asked quietly. "Why wait?" he replied. "You've been busy. I've been busy. Let's just make it clean." He handed her the envelope. She took it, her hands steady, even though her chest felt like it was caving in. "Fine," she said. David blinked, surprised by her composure. "Fine. Yeah, fine. I'll have my lawyer look at it." He nodded, almost relieved. "Good. I'll send over the details." And then he left, walked out of the auditorium, out of her life, without looking back. Sarah's family surrounded her, confused, outraged, heartbroken on her behalf. But Sarah didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She folded the envelope, tucked it into her purse, and said, "Let's go get lunch." Because she knew something David didn't. In 72 hours, everything would change. If you're still watching, comment, "I stayed." Because what happens next changes everything. Sarah didn't tell anyone the full story. Not her parents. Not her brother. Not even her closest friend from business school. She went through the motions. Responded to her lawyer. Signed where she was supposed to sign. Moved her things out of the house she and David had shared and into a small apartment downtown. She didn't fight him on the assets. Didn't argue over furniture or savings accounts. David assumed it was because she had nothing to fight for. He told his friends she'd taken it well, that the split was mutual, that they'd both just grown apart. He started dating someone new within 2 weeks. Posted photos of them at restaurants, at rooftop bars, at a basketball game. Sarah saw them. Didn't react. Didn't comment. Just kept moving forward. But inside, she was carrying a weight no one could see. Not grief over the marriage. That had died long before he handed her those papers. What she carried was something else. A kind of quiet fury. Not at him exactly. At the years she'd spent making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. At the way she'd apologized for her ambition. At the fact that he never once asked what she was actually working on. He assumed she was ordinary. Assumed her dreams were decorative. And now he'd walked away, confident he'd escaped before she became a burden. Sarah let him believe it, because in 3 days, the deal she'd been quietly building would close, and David would learn exactly what he'd lost. 72 hours after David handed her divorce papers, Sarah sat in a conference room on the 40th floor of a building in Manhattan. Across from her sat Elena Cross, 3 corporate lawyers, and the CFO of one of the largest consumer technology firms in the country. The deal had been 18 months in the making. Sarah's thesis, her research into consumer behavior and adaptive branding, had caught Elena's attention because it wasn't theoretical. It was actionable, scalable, worth building a company around. Elena had funded the initial pilot. Sarah had proven the model worked. Now, they were finalizing a partnership that would take Sarah's framework and integrate it into a platform projected to generate $500 million in revenue within 3 years. Sarah wasn't just a consultant on this deal. She was a co-founder, a primary stakeholder. The contract gave her a 22% equity share and a seat on the executive board. When the signatures were finalized, Elena reached across the table and shook Sarah's hand. "Congratulations," she said. "You just became one of the most influential people in this industry." Sarah smiled. Not wide, not triumphant, just calm. "Thank you," she said. The news broke that evening. Trade publications ran the story. Sarah's name appeared in headlines. Her LinkedIn exploded with messages. Investors, journalists, former classmates, all reaching out. And David saw it. He was at dinner with his new girlfriend when someone at the table mentioned the deal. "Wait, isn't that your ex-wife?" one of his friends asked, showing him the article on his phone. David's face went white. He read the headline 3 times, scrolled through the details, saw the numbers, saw Sarah's name listed as co-founder, saw her photo, professional, confident, standing beside Elena Cross. He excused himself from the table, went outside, called Sarah. She didn't answer. He called again and again, left a voicemail. "Sarah, it's me. I just saw the news. I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? We should talk. Call me back." She never did, because there was nothing left to say. He'd made his choice on graduation day, and now he had to live with it. Sarah didn't gloat, didn't post about the deal on social media, didn't send David a message reminding him of what he'd said, what he'd assumed, what he'd thrown away. She simply moved forward, built her company, honored her vision, lived the life she'd worked for. David, on the other hand, spent the following months in a spiral of regret he couldn't voice. He'd told everyone the divorce was mutual. He couldn't now admit he'd made a catastrophic mistake. His new relationship fizzled. His job felt hollow. He watched from a distance as Sarah's career soared, knowing he'd been given a front-row seat to greatness and chosen to walk out. The lesson here isn't about revenge. It's about vision. It's about the danger of measuring someone's worth through your own limited lens. David looked at Sarah and saw someone small because he needed her to be small. He couldn't imagine her success because it threatened his ego. And when she proved him wrong, it wasn't her responsibility to teach him. It was his burden to carry. Some mistakes you don't get to fix. Some doors, once you walk through them, lock behind you. And sometimes, the person you underestimated becomes the one you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you'd believed in. So let me ask you, what would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have told him about the deal before it closed? Would you have fought harder to make him see you? Or would you have done exactly what she did and let your success speak for itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how you would have handled it. And if this story made you think, made you feel something, hit that subscribe button. Because we've got more stories like this. Stories about quiet strength, about patience, about people who were underestimated and proved the world wrong. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.